Lady Death is the gripping memoir of Lyudmila Pavlichenko, the most lethal female sniper in history. Dive into the harrowing and heroic account of a young Soviet woman who became a legend during World War II with 309 confirmed kills. Let's begin. We nevertheless did receive a reward for the capture of No-Name Height, a leave pass for the city. People recommended that Alexei Kitsenko and I visit the museum, which had opened on the 23rd of February in the premises of the picture gallery on Frunze Street. We wandered slowly through the galleries and viewed the exhibits. This was a real journey into history, from the first siege of 1854-5 to the era of the Great October Socialist Revolution and the Civil War, and then the events and heroes of the second siege. Among the photographs and documents, I found information about the Chapayev division, about machine gunner Nina Onelova, and even about myself. In a separate hall, the organizers had displayed the weapons and ammunition manufactured for the coastal army at Sevastopol factories and hung portraits of production shock workers. Also on exhibit were trophies, German weaponry, fragments of aircraft shot down over the city, letters and diaries of the invaders, standards of fascist regiments captured in combat, and Nazi orders for the local population, in which the most frequently encountered word was firing squad. Despite the military action, the residents of Sevastopol constantly undertook operations to restore the shattered economy, and the city did not look neglected, dirty, or deserted. Shops, polyclinics, public baths, hairdressers, and various trade services were open, and the trams were working. Now they had opened a new museum, which everyone was happy to visit. Sevastopol residents themselves, people recently arrived from unoccupied territory, and those on leave from military units. The attitude toward frontline troops was very cordial. A shoe shiner offered us free service, and women we met in a Kommunahafe, Marime Square, by the Udarnik cinema, offered to do washing and ironing, yet the water supply in the city was strictly rationed. We said goodbye to winter without regret. It had been one of combat and anxiety, but it had strengthened the defenders in the belief that they were capable of holding out against the furious onslaught of the Nazis. Some relief was expected with the spring. The forests on the Mackenzie Hills would turn green, and the foliage would conceal our dugouts, trenches, communication passages, and firing points from the enemy, so that there would be fewer losses. The warm south wind would blow from the sea, and guard duty at night would not be so cold. Rain would fall, albeit not very plentifully, but there would still be more water in the mountain springs. The sun would peep out more often through the clouds, and we would imagine that this was the sun of victory. On the morning of the 3rd of March 1942, the weather was so fine and warm that it was impossible to stay in the dugout. Alexei and I decided to have breakfast in the fresh air to the chirping of the irrepressible Sevastopol sparrows. With his arm around my shoulders, my husband was sitting beside me on a fallen tree and relating some humorous incident from his childhood. The enemy artillery attack on the lines of the 54th Regiment started suddenly. It came from long-range ordnance. The first shells exploded far in the rear. The second salvo fell short, but the third... "You're not tired, are you?" Kitsenko had just asked me when the third shell exploded behind our backs. Dozens of splinters whistled through the air. My junior lieutenant shielded me from them but did not escape wounds himself. In the first minute, I did not think that it was serious. Alexei clutched his right shoulder and groaned, but then the blood streamed profusely down the sleeve of his tunic. His arm hung limp, and a pallor began to cover his face. "Leonia, hold on! Leonia, I'll bandage you right away." I tore open a first aid pack and began hurriedly bandaging his shoulders. The white gauze went on in a first, second, and third layer, but the wounds proved to be deep and the blood seeped through the gauze. Fyodor Seddik came to our aid. We laid the commander on a blanket and carried him to the first aid station at the double. Fortunately, the company medical orderly, Yelena Pali, was on hand, as well as a cart harnessed to a pair of horses. Placing the company commander on the seat, we quickly set off for Inkerman to the divisional medical battalion and our surgeon Pichel Gayek. There, Leonia was placed on the operating table without delay. I stayed to await the outcome. The hope of a miracle was still alive in my heart. During the hour-and-a-half wait, I reflected on many things, recalling my first meeting with him, the forest at sunset, when the junior lieutenant had found me under the shattered tree, his declaration of love, and our happy conjugal life. There was no one closer or dearer to me than Alexei Arkadyevich. He had remained cheerful in difficult circumstances, did not despair at failure, and success did not go to his head. But the main thing was that he was always able to find the right words for the occasion, and I trusted him more than I trusted myself. Our amazing doctor, Vladimir Fyodorovich Pishelgayek, came out of the operating theater with a gloomy face, squeezed my hand, and said, "Bear up, Lyudmila. There is not much hope of a recovery." His right arm had to be amputated. It was hanging by a single tendon. What's much worse are the 7 splinters in his back. I have taken 3 out. But the rest, I do not remember what happened next. I came to on a narrow hospital bed in a room somewhere. A rather young nurse, in a white gown and headscarf, gave me a glass of some liquid which smelled strongly of valerian, and asked me to drink it all. I did as she requested, still in a strange twilight state. I automatically placed my hand on the holster containing my TT pistol, and realized that it was not there. The girl gave me a frightened look and began to explain. The weapon would be returned to me without fail, but later. "My pistol! Give it back to me right now." With a sudden jerk, I got up from the bed. "Lyuda! Lyuda! Stop it!" It turned out that Pichel Gayek was standing not far away. "What are you intending to do? Why do you need a pistol?" "It's my assigned service weapon. It should be in my possession at all times. You need to calm down first." "Do you think I want to commit suicide?" I said, no doubt too loudly. "No, that won't happen. They won't live to see that. The Fritzes will pay dearly for his death. I'll get even with them." To cut a long story short, the Totosha was returned to me after some commotion, and, tenderly stroking the ripped handle, I placed the heavy pistol in its holster and buttoned it up. Battalion Commander Dromin gave me permission to remain in the hospital by my seriously wounded husband. At night, Alexei alternated between bouts of delirium, losing consciousness, and coming to, when he struggled to smile and tried to say something encouraging. By noon on the 4th of March, it was all over. He died in my arms. The funeral took place the following day at the Fraternal Cemetery. It was attended by all the officers from the 54th Regiment who were not on duty, the regimental commander, Major Matusievich, Military Commissar Maltsev, many troops from the 2nd Company, and by my platoon in its entirety. Matusievich delivered a brief but powerful and colorful address. Then Junior Lieutenant Kitsenko was bade farewell by his subordinates. The lowering of the coffin into the grave was accompanied by the volleys of a farewell rifle and submachine gun salute. The officers saluted with shots from their pistols, but I was unable to reach for my TT. Maltsev asked me why I was not saluting. To be honest, our political instructors could sometimes demonstrate astonishing sensitivity, and it was impossible to give them a sincere response. My reply probably sounded insolent. I'm not a performer who fires into the air. My salute will be directed at the Nazis. I promise to fell at least 100 of them, if not more. Of course, the truth lay elsewhere. I did not want to come to terms with the departure of my beloved husband. He still remained beside me, and I felt his presence. Leonia's mangled body lay in the earth of Sevastopol, but his kind, sensitive soul was yet to find a resting place. It was not appropriate for me to bid him farewell with shots from a weapon which we both loved to the same degree. For me, it had long become a sacred object. The country and the army had given it to me to defend with, to attack with, and to have faith in one's own strength at moments when one is required to make a final choice, either instant death or long-term shame. My life changed after Alexei Kitsenko's funeral. Returning to our dugout, what is home, I spent 3 sleepless nights. Then I tried to pick up a sniper rifle and realized that I could not hold it. My hands were trembling so much. I had to go to the medical battalion, to a neuropathologist. He made a diagnosis, post-traumatic neurosis, and proposed that I spend 2 weeks in hospital, regularly drinking some infusion from valerian root and some medicine, which included a bromide solution. In the treatment center, situated in the tunnels of Inkerman, it was quiet, calm, and very boring. I was visited by Fyodor Sedych, now promoted to the rank of senior sergeant, and Vladimir Volchkov, who had become a sergeant. On the 9th day after the death of our company commander, we decided to go to the cemetery and visit Alexei. The cemetery lay in the 4th Defense Sector. There were 3 roads leading there from our 3rd sector, one of them asphalted. The Germans had bombed it a number of times, but our sappers had restored this important transport highway again and again, since the burial grounds were also the location of the staff headquarters of Colonel Alexander Grigorievich Kapitokin, commandant of the 4th sector, and at the same time commander of the 95th Rifle Division. Army vehicles often went there, and it was no effort to find one going your way. Surrounded by a fairly high wall of Crimean limestone with iron gates and pyramid towers on either side, from a distance, the fraternal cemetery resembled a fortress. Here thousands of participants in the first siege of the city had found rest, among them 30 generals and admirals. The defenders of Sevastopol were interred there, not just during the military action, but in accordance with a decree from the emperor and their own testament. For many years after, up till 1912, this magnificent warrior's memorial was enhanced by a church dedicated to Saint Nicholas, the wonder worker, which was also pyramid-shaped and had wonderful mosaics inside. The church now stood without its cross and with its roof smashed in. Our troops had earlier maintained an artillery spotter's post there. Learning of this, the Nazis had destroyed the ancient church by a direct hit with a shell. The interment sites for Soviet soldiers and officers were by the northeast wall of the cemetery on the other side of a hill. We entered the burial ground through the southern gates and began to climb slowly up along its central path towards the church standing on the hill. 8 days earlier, I had had neither the strength nor the time to view the lavish gravestones of white and black marble, granite, and diorite on either side of the path. Now, we were in no hurry and stopped at the very beginning of the path by a beautiful fluted white marble column, crowned by the bust of a man clad in an overcoat with his uniform showing underneath. Below the bust, a double-headed eagle portrait, sculpted in marble, held in its claws a round shield bearing the inscription, "To Krylev from Russia." General Krylev, hero of the first siege, had personally led the infantry of the Transbalkan, Sievsk, and Suzdal regiments into attack in the defense of the Malakoff Heights. With their bayonets, the soldiers had turned the French and British to flee a number of times. On this fine March day, the marble statue of Krylev looked down sadly from the top of the column on the visitors to the cemetery. Beyond the memorial lay communal graves interring thousands and thousands of the city's defenders, their names unknown. But the designers of the memorial had addressed them with this inscription: "Close your ranks, you men of unparalleled courage, and gather fraternally around the hero of the Battle of Sevastopol in your family grave." We went further along the path. The gravestones here had no doubt been created by the best sculptors, architects, and artists. They had used for their handiwork marble, granite, and metal castings with quaint ornamentation. Despite the destructive force of time, the metal preserved the names, ranks, duties, and birth and death dates of the heroes of the first siege. There was nothing like this yet in place in the area behind the church of St. Nicholas, set aside for the victims of the second siege. Carefully arranged mounds of earth surmounted by plywood stars stretched along the grey wall. The grave of Junior Lieutenant Alexei Arkadievich Kitsenko of the 54th Rifle Regiment nevertheless stood out from the others. The star and the stand under it were thickly daubed with a red paint, and a more extensive inscription had been recorded. Born August 10th, 1905, died from wounds, April 3rd, 1942. Beside it stood a tree stump. We sat down on it and viewed the entire sad row. Here and there the earth had already dried and become crumbly, so that the mounds had lost their shape, but in other places it remained funereally black. I placed some green juniper fronds on the grave, then took a crust of bread from my canvas gas mask bag and crumbled it by the stand bearing the star, so that the birds would fly here more frequently. Fyodor pulled out a flask of diluted spirit, poured it into a metal beaker, and also placed it by the star. After this, we each drank a mouthful of this commonplace frontline beverage and pondered for a long time. Rest in peace. I could have repeated these words, often encountered on the ancient memorials of the Fratate Paternal Cemetery. With the greatest reluctance, I bade farewell to my beloved. We had to return to the firing lines and resume our soldiers' duties with sang-froid, patience, and iron tenacity. Back at the regiment, some mail awaited me. There were letters from my sister Valentina, my mother, father, and son. I sat down to reply to their missives. Dear beloved Lenusia, this is the first time in 9 months that I have received letters from you. 2 from Valia, and from you, more Sheikh and Dad. Today I'm writing to each of you. Lenusia, it is scarcely possible to convey my relief. It's difficult for you, but dearest, you are far behind the front lines. That is the main thing. Lenusia, you cannot imagine what modern war is like. How I have worried about you, my dear. In a day or two, I'll send you a document to say that I am in the army and that should improve things a little for you materially. Now allow me to write about myself. I'm a senior sergeant, a sniper, and my tally is 257. The other day I received a certificate from the Army's Military Council and a diploma. My name has been put forward for a military order of Lenin. That is all. True, I was first on the Army Honors Board, and that, Lenusia, is all. Well, specific episodes can wait till the war's over. Now's not the time to indulge in memoirs. All this time, that is, from the 6th of August, up until now, I have been continuously in the front line of fire. I am now a sniping instructor. I am sending you a newspaper cutting and my ration card. In my view, that is enough. Your silly Lyuda is becoming even sillier from joy that you, my dear one, are well behind the front lines. Lenusia, I don't need anything. We have everything. The people feed us. I have, dear, suffered a great loss. Leonia was buried on the 5th of March. He is no longer with me. But never mind, Lenusia, I will fight on by myself. It is difficult to come to terms with it, but I am proud of him. He was a magnificent man. There are few like him. 3 times he rescued me, Mum, and rescuing someone in war really does mean rescuing them. Well, Lenusia, I won't talk, or rather write, about this anymore. It's still too painful. The letter from my son was touching. He passed on his news from school. He had got an excellent for Russian dictation and good for his mental arithmetic test. But what he liked most of all was the textbook Our Native Language, and in it the story of military leader Alexander Vasilievich Suvorov. This is how it has been from ancient times. Russians always defeat the enemies of their fatherland. After rereading Morzhik's short sentences several times, looking at the lined paper filled with his elaborate penmanship, I began to think. I had to tell this 10-year-old boy about the war that was currently in progress on the territory of his own country. This was an unprecedented war, unparalleled in the ruthlessness which had been unleashed to exterminate our people. As long as I did not frighten the little man, or fill him with fear unbecoming to a future soldier. On the defense lines at Sevastopol there was, as before, relative calm. But the snipers had a full workload, and by way of giving them recognition for their contribution to the struggle against the invader, the command of the Sevastopol Defense District decided to hold a rally where sharpshooters could swap experience. We gathered on Monday, the 16th of March 1942. A red calico banner hung over the stage. The big white letters on it read, "Greetings to our snipers, the Stakhanovites of the front." Seated at a table on the stage under the banner were the VIPs, the commander of the Black Sea Fleet, Vice Admiral F.S. Oktyabrski, the commander of the Coastal Army, Major General I.Y. Petrov, Divisional Commander Tu Azarov, a member of the Military Council for the Fleet and Brigade, Commissar M.G. Kuznetsov, a member of the Army Military Council. They listened to an address on the development of sniping in the Sevastopol Defense District by the Coastal Army's Deputy Chief of Staff, Major General V.F. Vorobyov. It was an honest speech which depicted the situation fairly. Vorobyov began in a somewhat poetic fashion. The general said that spring had arrived and the nights, alas, had grown short. This was bad for the defenders of the city, because supplies were delivered principally by sea, on the ships of the Black Sea Steamship Service and the Black Sea Fleet. They arrived at Sevastopol at night and were unloaded at the wharves of South Bay, undetected by enemy aerial reconnaissance. Now, there would be fewer such opportunities, and given the superiority of the Nazi Air Force, new difficulties could be expected in the delivery of ammunition, weapons, provisions, and reinforcements. The enemy was preparing for a third assault on the main naval base. According to reconnaissance data, the numbers in the German 11th Army had risen and now amounted to approximately 200,000, twice the number of Soviet troops and officers in positions around the city. The Fritzes were constantly transporting new ordnance and mortars up to their firing lines. The total number of such weapons could be close to the impressive figure of 2,000, and we had only 600 artillery units in working order. The 8th Air Corps, under the command of the well-known ace, General von Richthofen, was being transferred to the Crimea, and the Germans would have at their disposal around 700 aircraft against our 90 war machines. Turning to the audience of about 150 of the best soldiers in the Sevastopol infantry, each with at least 40 dead enemy soldiers and officers in their tally, Major General Vorobyov spoke frankly. There are more Fritzes now. That means that we have to kill them in greater numbers in order at least to even up the chances of those attacking and those defending. According to our statistics, an ordinary soldier requires 8 to 10 cartridges to neutralize a single enemy, while a sniper needs only 1 or 2. Dear comrades, bear in mind that there will be less ammunition coming in, and therefore it will have to be used more sparingly and expended more effectively. The command of the Sevastopol Defense District calls on you not only to operate like Stakhanovites yourselves, like shock workers in your firing positions, but also to teach other soldiers the art of sharpshooting. Each of you should select a group of 10 to 15 pupils and tutor them for a short period. We, for our part, promise to supply them with rifles and telescope sights. I was the first to speak on behalf of the snipers at the rally because I had the largest tally of dead Nazis, 257. I said that we had been given the honorary title Stakhanovites of the front, and we had to back this up with good results in our shooting and undertake new obligations. Personally, I was pledging myself to raise my tally to 300 Nazis. Taking second place in this tacit competition was the Chief Sergeant Major of the 7th Naval Infantry Brigade, Submachine Gun Platoon Commander, Noi Adamia, with a tally of 165. A Georgian by birth, he had graduated before the war from the Odessa Naval College and served in the Black Sea Fleet. In his nervousness, Noi spoke not only with a strong Caucasian accent but also very emotionally. He reported to those present that he had already taught the basics of sharpshooting to around 80 soldiers, but intended to continue this work further. In the end, he took his tally to 200 Nazis and went missing in action by the Chersonese lighthouse at the beginning of July 1942. He was then posthumously awarded the title Hero of the Soviet Union. Former border guard Ivan Levkin, a corporal in the 456th NKVD regiment, which was now part of the 109th Rifle Division, was able to talk about the 88th enemy he had killed. His regimental mate and fellow contributor, Ivan Bogatyr, another corporal, had a score of 75. Ivan particularly distinguished himself later during the last assault on Sevastopol. While wounded, he repelled enemy attacks with a machine gun for 5 hours on a firing line near the village of Balaklava. For this feat, he was awarded the title of Hero of the Soviet Union. This concludes the 18th part of the story. Thank you very much for listening. What do you think of Pavlichenko's story? Please subscribe for more episodes and leave a comment.